Good afternoon, and I'm very glad to welcome you all to our session, Banking on Open Source Today, Boost. I think this is a very inspiring and challenging title. I hope this will be a good discussion, compensating the bad weather, the rainy weather outside. My name is Rodica Tuchila. I am working for the Romanian Banking Association, and I am the chairperson of the Romanian SWIFT user group. This session is organized by Alevo, a Romanian software provider focused on the financial and banking market. Alevo is also a SWIFT partner for solutions and services. They have a very innovative and young team, and in the same time they have a rich experience in the banking and IT business. I was invited by Alevo team to facilitate an open discussion between our panelists who are well-known professionals with rich experience both in banking and technology. We will discuss about how the technology impacts the individuals and corporates businesses, about the evolution of the financial services sector in this context, the perspective of the new entrants in the market versus the already existing credit institutions, and finally, if Internet of Things become the next frontier for financial services. We are speaking about Internet of Things. It is a reality today, as according to Gartner, there will be 26 billion devices on the Internet of Things by 2020. But I would not like to speak too much. I will present our panelists, and I will ask each of them to make a short comment, a short statement regarding the way the technology progress will impact the business activities, the evolution of the banking and financial service industry, and also which will be the outlook of economy and financial environment, especially in banking in this context. I will start with Mircea. Mircea Mihaescu is Managing Director at Sberbank Digital Ventures and SBT Venture Capital. He is managing a $100 million fintech venture investment fund, investing worldwide in the most promising startups of the financial industry. Before that, he was Director of IT Strategy and Director of the Technology Research Center of Sberbank, being responsible for the bank long-term IT roadmap and technology innovation pilots. Before joining Sberbank, Mircea led international innovation projects in social computing, cybersecurity, and business process management, working for companies like IBM, Think Dynamics, Bimani, and the Bank of Montreal Capital. So, Mircea,
thank you. Thank you, Rodica. Thank you for the introduction. Now we have to make sure next time we make it shorter. Yeah.
No.
As you get older, there are longer and longer list of things that you've done. So the question is about what will happen, what I see as the future of banking with regards to new technologies. And we are talking about Internet of Things, we are talking about Bitcoin, we are talking about open source. Most banks are large institutions, and most banks they've realized today that IT is a very important component of what they do. And we all know that in IT things change relatively quickly. Very rare you'll see a bank that's still using technology from 15, 20 years ago. Most of them will update their technology with a cycle that's moving fast. We don't see banks sitting idle. Yeah? I don't think that banks will stop using new technologies. And we see this all over the world. With you here in the room, we see on the Cybers floor, half of the people there are from banks, half are from technology providers. And we even have a corner where there are startups, fintech startups, financial technology startups. The question is, will banks ever use them? Because if banks will always buy from Oracle and IBM and Microsoft, great companies, by the way, I used to work for them, they will never use technology from startups, and the only way would be for IBM to buy the small company to bring the technology to the bank. So my view is that clearly banks need to work with startups. How they do that, that's a much more complicated question, and there are specific ways that we have seen banks establishing technology innovation groups that look at piloting new technologies. I also think that open source has a special role in here. We have seen the impact of open source all over the world. For example, the technologies that very successful technology companies like Google and Facebook and even Twitter or Instagram, a lot of the successful companies, they have used a lot of open source components. I worked for IBM for many years, and I can tell you more than half of the software that you buy from IBM is actually open source. Yeah. So this is a huge impact that has not been appreciated by banks yet. They think, many of my colleagues, they think that we don't want to use open source because it's not secure. There is no one supporting it, therefore they end up buying from a large technology providers who are combining all the open source components. Yeah, but I'll stop talking about Internet of Things because that's a longer discussion, and I'll let my colleagues talk.
Thank you, Mircea. I will present the next panelist, Radu Gheța. He's the President and Chief Executive Officer of Czech Bank and the Chairman of the Board of the Romanian Banking Association. He is one of the most proeminent and respected personalities in the Romanian banking industry. He's the chairperson of the SWIFT national member group since 1992, when the first banks from Romania connected to SWIFT. Since March 2007, he represents the Romanian Banking Association in the plenary of the European Payments Council. He is also the President of the SEPA National Committee and our representative in the board of the European Banking Federation.
Thank you, Rodica. Welcome to everybody. So as Mircea said, when you have a long presentation, that means you are old, which is, in my case, is true. But you know, talking about new technology, talking about new things, new, let's say, gadgets, it's always very exciting. Talking about banks, and I will refer mainly commercial banks. I think always they were looking forward. They were in, let's say, in the front line, in the line of companies trying to implement as much as possible the new technology. Regardless, we are talking about, let's say, real time in payments, or talking about SWIFT, talking about cards, talking about, I'm just reminding you a few of the, let's say, technologies have been developed around banking industry. So they were pioneers, and in my opinion, they will remain pioneers in implementing new technologies. Talking about Internet things, or Internet for everything, here I think banks will promote this, but not extensively. Why? Because in my opinion, banking activity should be seen at least as two very different activities. One is payment, one is services you gave to payments, cards, you gave to your customers. And the other one is when you take risk, and when you assess risk. And in this case, the technology may help, but it's not going, in my opinion, to replace the human judgment and the human approach. And a part of this, there are some regulations, you cannot avoid it, like know your client, like anti-money laundering, which will restrict you as commercial bank to do transactions, to do business with a client without complying with the regulations I have mentioned. So, yes, the technology will be promoted by banks. The banks will take the advantages of all new technologies, but I'm sure the technology will not blind the banks to replace the human judgment everywhere. So in such circumstances, I think the competition is very important. Banks will compete in implementing the new technologies. And of course, the advantage of the first implementing something, it's very important. But also the banks who will take into consideration what I have mentioned, separating things, will be, in my opinion, more appreciated by clients and, fortunately or unfortunately, by regulators. And about the regulation in the banking system, I think is a subject to discuss days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll turn a little to the more technological part of this. It's Matteo Rizzi. He's a general partner of SBT Venture Capital, focused on Series A startups in the financial industry landscape. He has over 20 years of experience in the technology industry, out of which 12 years of experience in SWIFT. He's consultant in innovation management, corporate strategy. He's a speaker, a blogger. His favorite topics are innovation, collaboration, and enterprise X.0. He founded the swiftcommunity.net, the Swift-owned web platform for open dialogue, and in 2007, he co-founded InnoTribe, the Swift infrastructure enabling collaborative innovation in the financial industry. So, Matteo.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. So, I can echo what Mircea was saying about banking having to collaborate with startups. And since the InnoTribe inception back in 2007, the experience said that there are only two kinds of startups. One group that is trying to basically fight in banks on a pure, competitive aspect. And others that are trying to re-intermediate the banks to either catch new business or do the existing business in a better way. And this is where I think that the whole debate about, what is the relationship between open source and the opportunity for the banks to grasp new business. And in my opinion, it's all about the distribution platform. This is where Internet of Things actually comes into play as well. I want to give you, let me give you a couple of examples, concrete examples. So take as an example the alternative lending space. Today, banks cannot afford to loan say $10,000 to $100,000 to an SME or even to an individual, because the benefit they would take off such a small loan wouldn't compensate the paper and the hassle for actually decide to actually give that credit. This is where, in this world, startups come in. They provide a platform to enable banks to loan a small amount of money either to individual or to small businesses. But the only way to do this is to use data. And the only way to smartly use data is to use open APIs that banks has to provide for startups to analyze the credit rate of either individuals or startup and enable this new business. So we are talking about an historical business of banks enabled by technology that basically opens up new opportunities for existing banks. This is actually one example. And Internet of Things is actually all about data, and the only way to access that is doing it in an open source way. Now, Alevo, a couple of years ago, I think 2 or 3 years maybe ago, they actually made a very bold move by saying, okay, how about starting opening up the core banking system on the platform? This is actually what a few startups now are doing as the main reason to exist. The bold move was to transform what used to be a legacy system in something open. What is the advantage of it? It becomes a collaborative platform. So it enables an old system to new business, and the common denominator of it is the usage of data.
Good examples. Good examples. Thank you, Matteo. So our last panelist, Corina Mihalache. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Alevo since the beginning of this year. She was recently appointed for this position. Before, she was the Director of the Business Analysis Department of Alevo, accounting more than 10 years experience in payments and securities trading. She accomplished business analyst and project manager roles in many financial industry-related assignments. Corina is a SWIFT certified expert on SEPA, funds, and corporate tax.
Yeah. So thank you, Rodica, for the nice introduction.
Very, very short, very short.
She's the youngest, come on.
Exactly. It is what I wanted to
So
say.
thank you, Rodica, for the nice introduction of Alevo in the first place, and also for my introduction. And also thank you, Matteo, for, let's say, promoting our idea. It is true that we at Alevo thought a lot about bringing the open source, as we are a technology company, into the banking space. Maybe our move from a legacy system, payment system, to an open source solution for processing financial transaction may look bold, but I think, in my opinion, it was the right way. It was the only way that will bring us further. It is how the things are evolving. So open source, it's now everywhere and should be also in banking. Collaborative space should be also in banking, where actually it's nothing worse to compete in the back offices, in the technology that banks are using in their back offices. They should compete as any other type of companies, in let's say in the space where their customers are, not in the, let's say, in the back office where, let's put it on a thing, every bank it's doing the same thing for many of years. Just taking the example of payments, the flows are pretty the same, and the processing part, it's pretty the same in all financial institutions for many years. Even new standards appear, new regulation appears on this certain area. The flows, it's still the same for many years. So the processing of the financial transaction, payments, or let's say securities, or whatever type of financial transaction, the processing of this transaction, it's a commodity right now. So why should banks compete on that? They will, let's say, really comply with the regulation if they are collaborating in this space. It will be easier to have a platform where you can speak up your problems, where you can find answers, when you can collaborate with others, because it's not a competitive space there. The competitive space, it's where the end customer should be. So that was the reason why we take this move to open up our solution, to actually open up to our competitors, because if we are looking at Sybos, there are many other companies that are doing pretty the same what we are doing, offering a solution for processing financial transactions. So we are open to collaboration with all other vendors. Banks should collaborate on this level with other banks or any other financial institution that provide the same processing thing.
So to extend your argument, banks should spend money on getting customers,
Exactly.
not on maintaining back office systems, because in the end it's a cost difference. Yeah, because we know and we've seen banks started de novo with a lot of open source components. Yeah? There are on the cost side two kind of software systems. Yeah, there are the ones that die and the ones that survive. The ones that survive are once again of two kinds. Yeah, the ones that are very expensive to maintain, they are closed, and the ones that are much cheaper to maintain and survive, they are the open source ones. Yeah? So it's a very clear cost.
And also,
argument.
if my mic is up, yes, and also it is actually pretty clear that open source is where the industry is going. Yesterday, we had the whole day debate on alternative currencies, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, right? So you don't need to be a genius to understand that a fully distributed model needs to be open source by definition, because there is no hub and spoke old banking model anymore. Now, fair enough, they also, if you take the example of Bitcoin, they have a 20 to 25 years projection, which seems a bit long because we probably all be retired, I hope much earlier, actually. But
Not the Alevo team, they're all young.
No, of course, I'm talking about the panelists. So the point being that if you take 20 years horizon on the Bitcoin, is actually only a fraction on how old the banking system is. So the challenge here is that we are exactly in this transition where we are implanting, that's the challenge of Alevo actually, you are implanting open source grains in a legacy system rather than doing something absolutely from scratch, because if you would, then open source would be the natural choice.
Thank you very much for sharing your opinions, very valuable ones. I have some questions for you, but after a short introduction, we have a short film.
That's what I like about this session. Videos.
So, in this world, everyone and everything is connected. Which will be the impact of Internet of Things in the banking services? This is the question. I'll ask Mircea, how can traditional banks face competition from new entrants on the market, startups that disintermediate the payment services?
So it may not be obvious, yeah, but most of the things that are enabled by Internet of Things that have to do with some commercial transaction, yeah, in the movie that we've just seen, and in many other situations, actually value needs to be exchanged, and we do that through monetary. Yeah? And banks will need to find a way to get in the middle of that in order to continue to support the payment system. And there are banks, and I've talked to some of them, they think that there is no way they will be able to do it, therefore they will allow startups or Google or Facebook to take over and they will provide the back end. The issue with that strategy, and we've had extensive discussions where I work, is that you lose connection with the customer. So you become a commodity, yeah? And if the banking account is a commodity, what will stop customers from moving from this bank to the other bank, and only banks that will actually help customers with all the transactions, including the new ones enabled by the Internet of Things, only those banks will survive. Yeah? So who will win? I personally, exactly as Matteo has said, my thinking is that the startups will help banks continue to survive, as opposed to startups coming from nowhere and replacing banks. Not easy to replace banks. Yeah? KYC, AML, all those things. Yeah, sure. Yeah. A startup with 11 people will never do it. But banks that know how to do it, that can use new technologies to survive, yes, including in the payment space. Okay.
Yes, and the next question comes for Radu. I think the technology boom we experienced in the last years could be perceived like a threat or like an opportunity for banks. And the question is, how can banks change to keep the pace with the technology evolution?
If we'll have open source solutions like Alevo is proposing, I don't see any stress here, because seems it's very cheap for banks. Huh? This is why I learned from you.
Cheap, it's not a...
It's a different cost structure.
Exactly.
Different cost structure. Okay, it's in installments, let's say. Anyway, coming back to Rodica's question, I think banks have passed a very, very difficult period of time in the last 10 years, almost 10 years. Let's make it 7, okay? Due to the crisis. A lot of expenses for banks to cover. In fact, the one paying the bill is the banking system, the bill of the crisis. Banks, the companies went bankruptcy. They lost most of them what they have put as initial capital or what they invested in capital. But most of them developed based on the loans they have taken from banks. So banks have been, let's say, very pressed on their profitability. Most of they went in the region of making losses. It's true, for the first time, the crisis have been treated differently than before, and the states and the organizations of states like EU, like United Nations or other organizations, they have adopted a different way of treating the effect of crisis, helping banks to survive. But even in those circumstances, the cost was very, very high. This, in my opinion, is a thing we have taken as it is. We, as banks, and we should not, let's say, affect the budgets for developing based on the new technology. Why? Because in case banks will not take such an approach, or the banks which are not going to take such an approach, they will disappear due to the competition. The client, the new profile of the banking client is the one knowing very well the new technology, and the clients are very demanding. First of all, when entering the bank, they are asking what are the products and services you can offer without being in the bank,
Present.
from home, from his office. So it's very important the banks to invest in getting them in the new technology. I'm coming back saying the open source solutions may help banks to come into the picture easily than before, when investments in technology were very heavy, very tough for commercial banks. Years and years in the last period of time, and I think there are statistics for that, the banks have not invested very much in bringing new systems, new core systems, due to what I have mentioned, the expenses and the pressure on their profitability due to the crisis, due to the provisions, due to write-off, due to all those new regulations coming from EU, from Basel, and now it's time to go on a new direction, and I'm coming back saying open source solutions may help, may bring the commercial banks into a new kind of competition.
It's almost like banks need to become real technology providers.
Yeah.
The bank that I know quite well, where I work right now, Sberbank, 7 years ago had 17 software developers and 200,000 people in the bank, about 8,000 in the back office doing paper moving. Yeah. And no one understood that that's not sustainable. That would have been the way to die. Yeah. So after investing heavily in IT, now there are 4,000 developers and 4,000 people moving papers around. And we need to continue to do that. But it was very expensive. If you keep buying software, packaged software, you end up saying, I cannot do this anymore. I go to a crisis. I don't have money. Therefore, I go again on the legacy path. And every time there is something that needs to be patched, another 80 people need to be hired to move paper, which is maybe good from a social point of view. Yeah, increases the workforce utilization, but with the wrong kind of skills and the wrong kind of salary.
Thank you. This helped me to introduce the next question for Matteo. How banks should look at technology and the startup ecosystem?
So, as a
Very carefully.
yeah, I would like to react to a couple of things that we saw in the video. First of all, the video was saying we are overflowing with technology, but is what we really need. So no longer than this morning at breakfast, and please be careful in tweeting that, but I was talking with an executive of a very large financial institutions. And he said that, based out of Europe, so hopefully he won't recognize himself if you tweet about this, he had to send $2,000 to his son in New York, for some studies. And because his son just got there, he didn't have a bank account, right? So can you believe that he used Western Union to send the money? And he worked for a bank, for a very large one. So that's actually a very trivial example where there are very simple problems that today banks are not solving yet. So my first reaction was say, come on, I can tell you right now 12 startups that could have done it, exactly the same thing, transferring, $2,000 from Europe to New York. And instead of having like the 5 or 6% commission of Western Union, you could have done it with 1 or 2%, right? So that's a very trivial, stupid example on how startups can help banks what they do today, simply cheaper. That's the most basic things that startups can do, okay? Now, another reaction, and then I'm coming to your questions, is about Internet of Things. Internet of Things has 3 components. Ubiquity, because it can be used everywhere. User experience, because it's a different way of performing some kind of action. And data, because data is the background of the power that the Internet of Things liberates by using this data to be performed in a new business, okay? Now, I don't think that Internet of Things in the developed countries will be mostly used for financial services. I would love to know before. I actually bought a washing machine 4 years ago in my new apartment. Every time now, 4 years later, I do a washing machine, I would love someone that will tell me, your washing machine is going to need a reparation in 30 days. I would love my washing machine to tell me that. But if I'm in Africa, what I would love to is, I would love to have a bracelet that allows me to enter into a store and being able to pay. A bracelet where I can put some money, a very simple, very low, low technology that allows me to be financially included without carrying cash. So depends which angle you look at it. Internet of Things means very different options.
So you're saying in a Western country, it's almost like a nice to have.
Exactly, but
other countries may be significant improvement.
Absolutely, yes. Now, how banks can work in startups? So this, and I don't want to, I've been talking about Castle and sandboxes for the past 6 hours, so I'm gonna talk about it once more. Actually, sandbox is what is missing still today in many financial institutions. What is a sandbox? Very simply, an environment that allows banks to fail. There is no place in banks to fail today. There is no room for that. But when you work with startups, you have to be prepared to do 5 to 10 proof of concepts, to test 5 to 10 new technologies, and be able to kill 7 or 8 of them during the course of the 6 to 12 months, and only keep the 2 that are really bringing business. Many banks don't take the time, the effort, the mindset, and the infrastructure to be able to put this in place. This is, at the end of the day, what InnoTribe is for Swift, with the advantage that being Swift a cooperative, many of it stays at the proof of concept level, right? Banks have the opportunity to actually thrive in a real business, maybe for part of it, or to access something new they don't have access to today, but they have to create the room for it. So that's the main challenge for banks to work with startups.
And the very small addition here, Sberbank Digital Ventures is yet a different model. Yeah? So we've been talking about the castle where no one is allowed to touch anything because that's the real business, and the sandbox where you can play. We are now trying a model where we're trying to build our own small castle outside the existing one. So we are trying to take these startups and launch businesses that are still part of the same banking group, but without having to follow all the rules of the big one. Yeah? Almost like our own little bank, I use the word little, to try these new things, but in the real market, not in the sandbox.
And there is also another challenge, thank you Misha, because you made me remind that, is that when the banks work with the startups, there are two options. First, is the bank willing to conglomerate this startup, making this part of their own ecosystem and just, use the solution of the startups for themselves? That would be option one. Banks traditionally, they don't like to share. And if they find a startup that is, useful and productive and opens new doors, they would like to keep it for themselves. Now, it might be the best option in some cases, but the mindset change that needs to happen here is that becoming the technology a commodity, the differentiation factor for banks should be the approach to the business, not the technology underlying. And most of what startups provide today is the technology. So this is where I think that we are still in this transition phase where banks need to understand that startups are not there to be bought, because by buying them, they will ensure that no one else will use it. They are there to simplify their infrastructure under the technology angle and be able to differentiate from one bank to the other into the business angle.
A very interesting point of view. And Corina, I would like to ask you, how should banks focus on delivering such services for their customers in line with other services used on a regular basis?
From my point of view, the buzzword here, it's sharing information where they are not in competition. So we are not a startup, so we are a pretty old company right now. As I told you, we are in the market since 1998, so we are an old company right now. But with this project that it's, let's say, 2 years old, or less than 2 years old, we just published the code this year, so maybe we can somehow, for this project, be as a startup right now. If you are looking at only this project. And with the community that we try to build around this product, because being an open source product, it will be alive if we will have a community around it, that it's really alive and active, and there is the space for this cooperation. So, as Matteo said, so banks should not keep from themselves if they saw something good in the market, if it's an technology or also on some services that they might see in the market and they are not providing yet by themselves, and they should also see that it's a good idea, that share with others, this is a good idea. Not just keep it for them and I will own it and somehow in some years let it die. So this is, from our point of view, the main driver to sharing. Sharing information where it's, of course, no competitive space.
There is a good example of where sharing information can actually help banks. But as Matteo has said, it's in the mindset, yeah? So you talked about KYC being a major problem, yeah? Would we benefit all if all banks will share the KYC information in one common data store where they will all contribute but they will see the aggregated value, it will be much easier for everybody. Not happening, yeah? But in time we will get there.
It's happening.
This is, let's say, a dream of banks, of commercial banks, to have a unique database to which they can address and to save money in maintaining such a big database. Unfortunately, there are some laws restricting very much banks to have such things. Think about to the legislation related to the how you call it, processing personal data. You cannot do it. You cannot spread it around, the information you have, because this is restricted by at least European legislation, which is very tough in this respect. So there are things to be done, steps to be done from technological point of view, from legal point of view, and I think you have mentioned somewhere 15 years or 10 years from now on, we should find solutions in order to create the frame in which both commercial banks and clients to be satisfied.
We've been talking about startups, and to the problem that you have just described, I've talked last Friday with a technology company that seems to have a solution to this problem, on sharing KYC data without doing anything illegal from the point of view of sharing personal information. So there are always these technologies.
If you allow me, I will say something which you should take it like a joke. Usually commercial banks don't like the word startup.
Yes.
Because when a client is a startup and is coming to the bank asking for a loan, immediately a lot of questions appear. So maybe we should find another word.
We are fully aware of that.
Attracting more banks in such debates and actions.
Each time we make a venture investment in a company, our colleagues at Sberbank, they say, oh, why do you invest in a company with a negative EBITDA? Like, of course, for the first 5 years, it will have negative EBITDA. That's the whole point of investing in an idea and trying to build a company. Yeah? Otherwise, let's open a flower shop and it will be positive EBITDA month one. Yeah?
Structurally speaking, what Alevo is trying to do makes a lot of sense. There are actually examples of, let me bring back the example of the cryptocurrencies. If you take Ripple, Ripple is a protocol, and then there is Ripple Labs, who is the commercial part of it, that is making money out of services to a protocol that is actually free, right? So the model is exactly the same. What is the difference is simply that, you come from the, say, old part of the banking system and trying to bring something new. These guys are coming from the future and are bringing it back here. And the only way to do this is this fully distributed model. But it's not the only venture of this type in the banking world that exists today. The objective is pretty clear.
So we're waiting for FlexCube to become open source.
Thank you very much.
Is anybody around
to pass to the next question.
Oh, there is another video, no?
Yes, we have another video.
Okay.
have a question for all of you, but I would ask you to answer shortly because we have to take some questions from the audience. And the question is is banking related to open collaboration and communicating with external services and entities, and how do banks boost themselves?
So to make it very short, they don't. Yeah. And I think it will take time before these ideas will penetrate. When Matteo co-founded InnoTribe, there were a handful of people. Now there are more and more and more. When I was head of technology innovation at Sberbank, there were like 5 people like me. Now there are 50. So yes, it will happen. It takes time.
It's true what we just said. They are not cooperated, and I will add yet. And they are not cooperating yet. The solutions like Alevo is proposing may bring them into a cooperation, and I'm sure they will succeed to bring banks together in cooperating in implementing open source solutions.
I'm going to be a little bit provocative for once. So
we were too short, huh?
Yeah. Short, super short.
No, we were too short.
I funded for Swift SwiftCommunity.net back in 2007, right? 2007, like Facebook was barely on foot, right, in Europe, and even very early stage technology. In a few months, we got like 20,000 bankers talking around it. I think that Swift was probably 5 years too early in creating a collaboration platform. Probably by doing this a couple of years after InnoTribe. So if Swift Community, instead of being born in 2007, would have seen the light in 2010, that could have become, first of all, it would still be there. And second, it would be the true platform for collaboration under a technological and under the mindset point of view. So this might be the right time for banks starting to collaborate more. One last word, there are concrete examples of it. SBT Venture Capital is an investor of a startup bootcamp. And Startup Bootcamp is nothing else than a fintech accelerator where you find Sberbank, MasterCard, Lloyds, Rabobank, thank you, that are looking at the same startups, so they have the same opportunity to engage with them. This did not exist 7 years ago.
So, as we already said a few years ago, we believe that there will be sharing ideas and they will cooperate, and otherwise we didn't go this way. So in the really near future, we think that the community that we start to build, it actually boosts.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask if there are any questions from the audience, or maybe you want to share your opinions with us. There is.
Oh.
Hi there, Jan Metcalf from IBS. I just wanted to ask actually a question to some of the guys from Sberbank and SSC Bank. You obviously mentioned, we talked a lot about open source technologies here, and obviously Alevo has a payments processing engine. I just kind of wondered whether you guys would ever consider using open source technologies for more business critical applications, such as for your core banking, whether that be something that you might consider.
Is this a question for me?
Or for SSC Bank.
Yeah, for you. If you consider an open source core banking.
Yes, it's a good question. We are in a process of replacing the very old core banking system we have. You have raised a question I never thought about, but while Alevo is based in Romania, I think we should investigate more this possibility.
So much for a business lead.
Yeah.
Why not? So
Like
it's
yesterday, we were talking about Bitcoin, yeah? And the question that I didn't dare ask all those people talking about Bitcoin, how many of you actually own Bitcoin? Yeah. It's the same with this. Now, what Alevo is doing is very early. Yeah? And they have to be, in a sense, admired for seeing the future and trying to, as a hockey great has said, to skate where the puck will be. Yeah? And this is where the puck will be in a year, in 2, in 3, but it will happen. Yeah? Otherwise, as I said earlier, the cost structure of maintaining legacy core banking systems will cripple banks. Yeah? And who doesn't see this maybe has other plans for his career.
I think Mircea is right. There are a lot of open applications in other domains, and they are used for many years. But in banking, the bank started right now to tackle the opportunity to see if it's possible. But this, if it will happen, I think it will change the face of the financial industry.
I think this has happened because the banking system worldwide is more regulated system in comparison with any other system. If you talk about energy, if you talk about other resources, other services, the banking system is very, very regulated. And unfortunately, after the crisis, the regulations are increasing in numbers, in requirements, in restricting banks to do what they normally consider being, without any
We
danger.
have another question here,
Yeah.
and only 2 minutes left.
And I want to say something to the gentleman as well afterwards. Go ahead.
Yes.
Please.
So I think the strategy most of the banks would be following is to have the open source on the certain value-added services, the technology to be built on the value-added services, and not to focus more on the core technology. Because there's a lot of dependence on the core technology. For example, if I have to even think about moving my core banking onto open source, it's definitely going to be a dream for me. Because core banking vendors should be also ready. There are core banking which are not even having APIs. Mm-hmm. Leave the open source completely different. So I think the strategy is that to focus on the value-added services to build on the open source technology and to retain the IP.
Yeah, so talking about core banking to your statement, Sberbank has its own in-house developed core banking, not packaged software. Yeah?
Correct.
And the question was, how can we make it scale 10 times, 100 times?
So, but if you look at
The only way to do that is to use software components that are actually open source today.
I think
They're
most
the
of
only
the large
ones.
banks are running the packaged core banking. I mean, there are very few banks who are running in-house core banking. Those who ran, transformed into a packaged core banking.
And those are the limitations.
But of course,
you cannot
we
grow
should
because
also
you
look
use
at
packaged.
the limitations of open source also. Should not leave the limitation part of open source. What are the risks in having open source? Because there are certain things which does not have adequate support. All those things are also important aspects.
Don't use those.
So in other words, would the HSBC or RBS be the first customers I would address? Do you want to switch your core bank to your versus? Probably not. But history says that many of these large institutions, they actually do it through a different brand. I mean, Italy is a good example. Both major institutions, they actually opened up another bank which is completely digital, which belongs to the group where they experiment. It's exactly the sandbox concept I was talking about. And this, everything is open source, including the core system.
Yeah, okay.
So, thank you very much. We have to
They are kicking us.
the point here.
0 time left.
Yes, but thank you very much to you and to the audience for being with us this session, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, guys.
Thank you.